The galaxy had known many wars, but none were as intense or unpredictable as the one between the Draknar Empire and the Pax Federation. The Draknar, an ancient race of towering aliens with shimmering silver skin and a reputation for unmatched intelligence, had been at the top of the galactic hierarchy for centuries. Their queen, Silara, ruled with strength and wisdom, her people believing her to be the key to their continued dominance. On the other side of the war stood the Pax Federation. Humanity, new to the galactic stage, had been thrust into this interstellar conflict. The humans were far from the most advanced in terms of technology, but they had something the Draknar did not: an unyielding spirit and an ability to adapt quickly to changing situations. The Pax Federation, though outnumbered and often outgunned, had proven time and again that their willpower and resourcefulness made them a force to be reckoned with. For years, the two races clashed, each side claiming victories and suffering losses. The Draknar had the upper hand in terms of power, but the humans had something they could not easily defeat: the unpredictability of their tactics. And nowhere was this more evident than in the figure of Kaidan, a human warrior who had led many successful missions against the Draknar forces. Kaidan wasn't the strongest or the most technologically equipped soldier. He didn't possess the advanced weaponry that many of the Draknar warriors wielded. But Kaidan had something else. His mind was sharp, and his courage was unbreakable. Time after time, he turned battles that seemed hopeless into victories, outsmarting and outmaneuvering the Draknar forces with strategies that left them baffled and frustrated. It was during one of these battles that Silara first took notice of him. She watched the footage of a particularly brutal skirmish, where Kaidan's forces had been cornered and seemingly outmatched. Yet, with an almost instinctual precision, he had devised a plan that turned the tide, leading his team to victory. It wasn't brute strength that won the day, but strategy, ingenuity, and the unshakable will of a man determined to protect his people. As Silara sat in her grand chamber, observing the battle reports, something about Kaidan fascinated her. She had faced countless enemies over the centuries, but none like him. He was not like the others. He didn't fight with reckless abandon, nor did he rely solely on his weapons. His mind was his weapon, and it made him unpredictable in a way that no alien race had ever been. Silara leaned forward, studying the holographic display of Kaidan's face. His eyes were focused and determined, his expression one of quiet intensity. He was different from all the others she had encountered. A thought formed in her mind, unbidden, and before she even realized it, she whispered aloud, "I want him." Her royal advisors, who stood silently by her side, gasped. No Draknar queen had ever chosen a human before. The very idea was unheard of. The humans were their enemies, after all, and it was unthinkable for one of their kind to be taken so personally. "Your Majesty, he is our enemy," one of her counselors said carefully. "You cannot simply take him." Silara stood tall, her silver robes flowing around her like liquid metal, reflecting the soft glow of the chamber's lights. She raised a hand, silencing her advisors. "Why not?" she asked. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of authority. "If we continue this war, more lives will be lost on both sides. But if I claim him, I will understand his kind better. Perhaps the war can end differently." There was a long silence in the room as her advisors exchanged uneasy glances. None of them dared to challenge her. The Draknar people revered their queen's wisdom above all else. If she commanded it, they would follow. But this was different. It was a risk, one that could change the course of the war. "Prepare a team," Silara ordered finally. "I want Kaidan captured alive." Meanwhile, far from the Draknar's palace, Kaidan was preparing for yet another battle. He wiped the sweat from his brow as he surveyed the battlefield, his uniform covered in dust and battle scars. His team had fought hard, but the Draknar forces were relentless. The latest battle had been tough, but they had held the line. "That was close," his second-in-command, Riley, said, his voice tense with the adrenaline of the fight. "We barely made it out." Caden sighed and looked up at the sky, where the stars shimmered faintly in the distance. He could feel it too. The war had taken a toll on everyone, but something about this conflict felt different from others he had been a part of. The Draknar weren't just brute force attackers anymore. They were studying humanity, adapting to their tactics, learning from each encounter. But why? Why were they so focused on humans? As he pondered, a strange feeling settled in his chest. It was as if someone was watching him. He brushed off the thought, chalking it up to the stress of the war. But the feeling wouldn't go away. There was something bigger at play here, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. That night, as the human soldiers rested in their makeshift camp, the air suddenly grew thick with energy. A low hum echoed through the night, followed by a blinding flash of light. Caden barely had time to react before everything went black. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a vast, glowing chamber, his hands bound by invisible energy restraints. His mind raced, trying to piece together what had happened. Then, standing before him, was none other than Solara, the queen of the Draknar. "Welcome, Caden," she said softly, her voice both regal and unnerving. "You have been chosen." The battle for the galaxy had taken a new turn. The war between the Draknar and humanity had entered uncharted territory, and Caden, once just a soldier fighting for his people, now stood at the heart of something far more complicated than he had ever imagined. His capture by the alien queen was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would change the course of the war and perhaps even the future of both races. But Caden had no idea yet what Solara's true intentions were. Caden's mind raced as he tried to adjust to his new surroundings. The moment his vision cleared, he realized he was no longer on the battlefield. Instead, he found himself in a vast, dimly lit chamber, the air thick with an unfamiliar, almost metallic scent. The walls pulsated with a soft, ethereal blue glow, casting an otherworldly light that made everything look dreamlike and surreal. He tugged at the restraints that bound his hands but felt no give. They weren't made of metal, but some kind of energy field, almost as if the very air around him had solidified to keep him trapped. As he struggled, his thoughts raced back to the battle. One moment, he had been leading his soldiers through the dirt and smoke of war, and the next, he was captured by an unseen force. There had been a flash of light, a feeling of being pulled, and then darkness. Then he saw her. Standing before him was Queen Solara, tall and graceful, her silver skin shimmering under the blue light like liquid mercury. Her piercing blue eyes studied him with a level of intensity that made Caden's heart race. She was unlike any being he had ever seen. A queen, a leader of the Draknar, the enemy of his people. Yet there was something in her gaze that wasn't hostile, but curious. "You are awake," Solara said, her voice smooth and regal, echoing in the quiet of the chamber. It was not a question, but a statement, as if she had known all along when he would regain consciousness. Caden clenched his jaw, his pride not allowing him to appear weak in front of her. He looked around, trying to find a way out, but the energy restraints around his wrists rendered him immobile. There was no sign of guards, no indication of where he was or why he had been taken. His mind raced with questions, but one stood out more than the others. "Why me? Where am I?" Caden demanded, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. He had been captured by the Draknar. His mind struggled to make sense of the situation. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a prisoner of war, and this queen, this alien ruler, was the reason for it. "You are on Zira Prime," Solara replied. Her words were calm, almost too calm for someone holding their enemy captive. "This is my palace. You have been chosen." "Chosen," Caden repeated, narrowing his eyes. He was still trying to process the weight of her words. "Chosen for what?" Solara tilted her head slightly, her piercing gaze never leaving his face. There was no malice in her eyes, no sense of anger or hostility. Instead, there was something softer, almost inquisitive. She stepped closer, her silvery robes flowing behind her like the mist in the chamber. "I have watched you," she said, her voice low but filled with purpose. "You are not like the others. You do not fight simply with strength. You fight with something deeper, something that cannot be understood through force alone." Caden felt his chest tighten at her words. He had always known that his strength wasn't in his physical power. It was in his mind, his ability to think on his feet, to adapt in ways that no one else seemed to understand. But hearing it from the Queen of the Draknar, the very people who had been his enemies for so long, made him uneasy. "She's studying me," he thought, trying to process the strange situation. He had never imagined he would find himself in a position like this. "What do you want from me?" Caden asked, his voice firm but tinged with suspicion. He had been through enough battles to know that nothing in war was ever as simple as it seemed. "I want to understand you, Caden," Solara said softly, her voice carrying an almost philosophical tone. "Your kind, your people, you fight in a way that no one else does. You never back down, even when all seems lost. You are relentless, and that is something I cannot ignore." Caden felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He wasn't sure whether to feel threatened or intrigued by her words. The Queen of the Draknar, the most advanced race in the galaxy, had admitted to being fascinated by humans, by him. But why? He had fought in many battles, faced countless enemies, but never had one of them shown this much interest in his mind, his heart. Solara stepped back slightly, her eyes never leaving his. She seemed to weigh her next words carefully. "I believe," she began slowly, "that this war could end if I understand your kind. Perhaps if I understand you, I can find a way to end this conflict. I have watched you, Caden. I've seen the way you lead your soldiers, not with fear or brutality, but with purpose. Your people, they fight for something greater than themselves. I want to know why." Caden's mind swirled with thoughts. "She's asking me why we fight." He couldn't understand it. The Draknar had been the aggressors in this war for so long. They had been the ones who had started it. And now, the Queen wanted to understand his people, wanted to understand him. "What are you asking for?" Caden demanded, his voice growing sharper. "You want me to be your prisoner, your study subject. Is that what this is?" Solara met his gaze with an intensity that almost made him falter. "I do not wish to make you a prisoner," she said, her tone calm but resolute. "I wish to learn from you. And perhaps in time, you will learn from me as well. I want peace, Caden. I have ruled my people for centuries, and yet I see that the war we have waged has only brought destruction. I want to end it. But to do that, I need to understand your people. Understand you." Caden's heart raced. This was not what he had expected. He had thought that Solara would be like every other enemy he had faced, ruthless, cold, and determined to destroy. But this queen, this strange and powerful being, seemed different. She wanted peace. She wanted to understand. "But why me?" "You are free to leave whenever you wish," Solara continued. "But before you do, I ask that you stay with me just a little longer. I need to know if you can help me understand your people. I need to know if there is a way for us to coexist, for our two peoples to stop this endless fighting." Caden stood there, silent, staring at the Queen. He had never been in a situation like this before. He had fought wars, led soldiers, and survived against impossible odds. But this was something entirely different. Could he trust Solara? Could he believe in her desire for peace? The weight of her words settled in his chest, and for the first time in a long time, Caden wasn't sure of the next step. The choice, it seemed, was his to make. This was only the beginning of a journey Caden never expected to embark on. As the Queen's prisoner, he would be forced to confront his own beliefs about war, peace, and the true nature of the enemy. What would he do now? Would he refuse to cooperate, or would he begin to see the possibility of a future where humanity and the Draknar could coexist? The answers lay in the hands of a soldier, a queen, and the fragile hope that peace might someday be possible. The days that followed were unlike anything Caden had ever experienced. The palace, though vast and beautiful, felt like a gilded cage. He was free to roam the hallways, but his every movement was watched, not by guards, but by Solara herself. She was always near, observing him with an intensity that unnerved him at times. Yet there was no malice in her gaze, only a quiet, unspoken curiosity. At first, Caden resisted. He refused to speak freely, to share anything with the queen. The walls of her palace seemed to close in around him, each hallway more suffocating than the last. Every conversation with Solara felt like a carefully laid trap, a way for her to understand humanity and perhaps break him. But no matter how much he wanted to fight her, there was a part of him that couldn't ignore the truth in her words. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't just another alien invader. She was different. One afternoon, as Caden sat alone in a spacious, tranquil garden within the palace grounds, Solara approached him. The garden was a serene place, filled with glowing plants and flowers, unlike any Caden had seen before. The scent was sweet, calming, and the soft hum of the air seemed to carry a sense of peace that Caden could not shake. He had grown to appreciate the quiet here, even if he felt like a prisoner in paradise. "You've been quiet, Caden," Solara said, her voice smooth but laced with a hint of concern. "You do not need to be afraid of me." Caden looked up, meeting her gaze with a mixture of frustration and resignation. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice cold but steady. "But I can't just forget that you're my enemy. I can't just forget what your people have done to mine." Solara nodded, her expression unchanged. "I understand. I would not ask you to forget, but I would ask you to consider something." She stepped closer, lowering herself to sit beside him on a stone bench. "We have been at war for years, Caden. Both of our people have suffered. But what if this war was based on a misunderstanding? What if we are not so different after all?" Caden's eyes narrowed. "We've been fighting for years. Our people have lost countless lives. There's no way this is just a misunderstanding." Solara sighed softly, her gaze drifting to the glowing plants around them. "I know, and I do not expect you to forgive the past. But I wonder, what if there is another way? A way that doesn't involve endless fighting. A way for us to understand each other, to learn from one another." Caden's heart ached at the idea. It was a possibility he had never allowed himself to entertain. The notion of peace seemed so far out of reach, so distant. For all his strategic brilliance, all the victories he had achieved, he had never once considered the possibility that there might be another way. "Do you really think we could ever find common ground?" Caden asked, his voice soft but filled with doubt. Solara turned to face him fully, her silver eyes shimmering with an intensity that made Caden's chest tighten. "I do not know, but I believe it is worth trying. Do you not see it, Caden? Your people fight with something deeper than just strength. You fight with heart, and that is what fascinates me. It is why I brought you here. I believe you can help us understand what it means to truly live, to fight not for power or conquest, but for something greater. Perhaps we can learn from each other." Caden stared at her for a long moment, trying to understand her words. He had fought countless battles, faced death on more than one occasion, and yet here he was, listening to a queen speak of peace, of understanding. It seemed impossible, but there was something in her voice, a sincerity that struck a chord in him. "I don't know if I can help you," Caden said quietly, his voice betraying a hint of vulnerability he had long kept hidden. "I don't know if my people would ever listen to me, even if I tried to tell them what I've seen here." Solara reached out, her hand resting gently on his arm. The warmth of her touch was unexpected, but it was not unwelcome. "You are more than just a soldier, Caden. You are a leader. You've led your people through battles that seemed impossible. You've inspired them, and that is something not everyone can do. Perhaps if you return to them, you can show them what I have shown you. Perhaps together, we can find a way to end this war." Caden closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on him. Could he truly be the one to bridge the gap between their worlds? Could he be the one to end the war that had cost so many lives on both sides? The idea was both overwhelming and terrifying. That night, as Caden lay awake in the quiet of his chamber, his thoughts were consumed with the possibility of peace. He had never imagined that it could be within his reach, let alone something he could help bring about. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that perhaps it was worth the risk. The next day, Solera took him to another part of the palace, a grand hall filled with ancient relics and artifacts from the Draknar's history. The room was silent, except for the soft echo of their footsteps on the polished floor. "This is our past," Solera said, her voice reverberating in the stillness. "This is what we have fought for. But I wonder, Caden, if we are willing to lose everything to preserve it. I do not wish to see my people destroy themselves, nor do I wish to destroy yours. I want a future, not a war." Caden looked around the room, the weight of history pressing in on him. He had spent his life fighting for a future where humanity could survive, grow, and thrive. But Solara's words had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Could the future they both desired be one of peace rather than destruction? For the first time, Caden wasn't sure what the right answer was. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't fight forever. And if peace was truly within reach, maybe it was worth fighting for it in a different way. As the days passed, Caden began to see Solara not as an enemy, but as a leader who, like him, was searching for something more, something beyond the violence and bloodshed of war. He still didn't know if he could trust her completely, but he couldn't deny the possibility that her vision of peace was something worth considering. Solara had shown him a glimpse of her world, a world filled with beauty, intelligence, and a desire for survival. She had chosen him, not for his strength or his skill in battle, but for his heart. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was his heart that would be the key to ending the war. But whether or not the galaxy would ever accept it, only time would tell. The days stretched into weeks, and Caden found himself in a strange limbo. Though the Draknar Palace was filled with luxury and beauty, it felt like a cage to him. There were no walls, no bars, but the weight of captivity still hung over him. As much as Solara had promised him freedom within the palace, he still could not shake the feeling that every move he made was being watched, not by guards but by her. She was ever present, guiding him through her world, showing him the depths of her empire. Caden had never expected to find himself in such a place, especially not as a guest. He had once been a soldier, someone who led with strength, who fought with honor. Now he was a prisoner of war, but his captivity felt less like the bars of a cell and more like an invitation to see the world through the eyes of his enemy. One afternoon, as they walked through the grand halls of the palace, Solara stopped by a large window that overlooked the lush gardens outside. The air shimmered with a soft glow as the sun set, casting golden light over the expansive view of Zira Prime. It was a peaceful sight, a sharp contrast to the harsh battles Caden had fought. "What do you see, Caden?" Solara asked softly, her eyes never leaving the horizon. Caden looked out at the gardens and the city beyond. "I see peace," he said slowly, feeling a weight settle in his chest. "But I also see a world that has fought too long to protect it." Solara nodded, her expression unreadable. "That is the dilemma we face, isn't it?" She turned to him, her piercing blue eyes meeting his. "We fight because we fear what we do not understand. We fight because we believe that the other side threatens everything we hold dear. But what if the battle is not the answer? What if understanding is?" Caden didn't answer immediately. He could feel her words resonating within him, as if they were stirring something deep inside. He had always been a soldier, a warrior who had been trained to fight, to protect his people at any cost. But Solara's words made him wonder if there was another way, one that didn't involve endless destruction. Could peace really be possible? Could he be the bridge between two worlds that had been torn apart for so long? Later that evening, as Caden sat alone in his chamber, his mind swirled with the possibilities. He had spent so many years fighting for survival, for victory, that the idea of peace seemed almost naive, even impossible. How could a war that had spanned so many years, that had taken so many lives, simply end with understanding? The Draknar had been his enemies for as long as he could remember. How could he possibly find a way to bridge that gap? And yet, Solara had made him doubt everything he thought he knew about war, about the Draknar. A knock at his door broke his thoughts, and Caden turned to find Solara standing in the doorway, her silhouette bathed in the soft glow of the palace lights. "Come with me," she said, her voice quiet but insistent. Caden stood, sensing that this was not a request, but a summons to something important. He followed her down the winding corridors, past chambers and hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly into the heart of the palace. Eventually, they reached a large door, carved with intricate patterns that shimmered in the dim light. Solara turned to him before entering. "You will see what no other human has ever seen," she said, her voice tinged with reverence. "It is the heart of my people, the very core of Zira Prime." The door opened, and Caden stepped inside, his breath catching in his throat. The room was vast, filled with glowing plants and trees unlike anything he had ever seen. In the center of the room stood a magnificent tree, its leaves shimmering like silver stars, its roots glowing with a soft ethereal light. The air was thick with the sweet, intoxicating scent of the tree, and for a moment, Caden felt as though he had stepped into another world altogether. "This is the tree of Siren," Solara said, her voice soft with awe. "It is the lifeblood of my people. Without it, Zira Prime would cease to exist. It gives us energy, sustains us, and connects us to the stars. Our ancestors believed it was a gift from the heavens." Caden moved closer to the tree, mesmerized by its beauty. He reached out to touch the silver leaves, feeling a strange warmth pulse from the tree as his fingers brushed against them. He had never seen anything like this before. Such beauty, such life. He had always believed that the Draknar were a ruthless, cold race, bent on conquering and destroying. But now, standing before the tree, he realized that there was more to them than he had ever understood. "What happens if it dies?" Caden asked, his voice barely a whisper. Solara's expression hardened, the calmness in her face replaced by a flicker of fear. "If the tree dies, we die with it," she said simply. "The war has damaged it. Every battle weakens the connection between our planet and the tree. We feared that humans would be the ones to destroy it. But now I realize that it was the war itself that was the true threat." Caden's mind raced. He had never considered the true cost of war for the Draknar. He had only ever seen the Draknar as the enemy, the force that had been bent on crushing humanity. But now, standing before the heart of their world, he saw them in a new light. They were not the mindless conquerors he had once thought them to be. They were a people who had lived for centuries, who had fought to protect something precious to them. Just as humanity had fought to protect Earth, the Draknar had fought to protect their home. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Caden asked, his voice filled with both anger and confusion. "Why didn't you let me see this?" Solara's gaze softened, and she stepped closer to him. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that you would not understand. Afraid that you would see us as enemies still. But I cannot let my people die because of fear. I cannot let your people die because of fear. I have to believe that there is another way." Caden stood in silence, absorbing her words. He had always been a soldier, always ready for the next fight, the next battle. But now, in the presence of this alien queen, he was forced to confront something he had never allowed himself to think about, the possibility of peace. Could he truly help end this war? Could he bridge the gap between their two worlds? "Tell me what you want me to do," Caden said finally, his voice steady. "I'll do whatever it takes." Solara smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened her features. "I want you to return to your people," she said. "I want you to show them what I have shown you. Show them the truth of our world. And together, perhaps we can find a way to end this war." Caden met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know if peace was possible, but he knew one thing for certain. If there was any hope for the future, it began with understanding. And that perhaps was the greatest battle of all. Caden left the tree of Siren with a heavy heart, his thoughts consumed with what lay ahead. He didn't know if his people would listen to him. He didn't know if they would accept the truth he had learned. But one thing was clear. The war was not just about victory or defeat. It was about survival, and perhaps the chance for something greater. And that, more than anything else, was worth fighting for.